The Tampa Bay Derby is this Saturday. Let's talk about the best way to approach the race from a betting standpoint and fair odds. Salutations and welcome, friends. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and welcome to this very special episode of Trust the Profits. Make sure to press that subscribe button to follow us on YouTube. We have so much different content. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. This is a big week, obviously. We have a ton of different content for the Tampa Bay Derby, for the Azeri out at Oaklawn Park. We have Thursday night live betting on the lounge. We got a lot of different content. So whatever you're into, Trust the Profits has you covered. But this episode, I think, is particularly interesting because rather than just handicapping a race, I wanted to bring on someone who I really trust to talk about fair odds and the way to approach perhaps betting a race rather than simply handicapping it. And of course, focusing on this week's big Kentucky Derby prep, Tampa Bay Derby down at Tampa Bay, 12 horse field. The overwhelming favorite is assumed to be Tapit Trice. Morning line at the time of recording this has not yet been put out, but we're assuming it's going to be a pretty low price and people might bet that horse down even further. But like I said, we're interested in how to approach betting this race and how to think about betting maybe more broadly in all of these preps. And so here to join me is Ed DeROSA from Horse Racing Nation. Ed, thank you so very much for joining me today to talk about this Tampa Bay Derby and your fair odds journey.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Two topics I love to talk about.
Well, for folks who might not be particularly familiar with fair odds, explain maybe just a little bit of an overview of what are fair odds and maybe kind of what got you thinking about this process of developing fair odds for these various Kentucky Derby prep races.
I approach handicapping races as a probability puzzle, really, and obviously there's a 100% chance of there being a winner, barring some sort of no contest situation, and then the bet's never occurred in the first place. So there's a 100% chance you will have a winner, and each of the entrants in a race have some 100 minus X chance of winning the race, and that probability converts to odds. So just like flipping a coin, fair odds would be 50% heads, 50% tails, assuming a fair coin, even money for each. If you were to roll a die, fair odds would be 5-1 on any one of the six numbers. Racing is similar. Each horse has some probability, and they add up to 100. Now, with a coin and a die, it's easy because they're all the same, and they add up to 100. In racing, they're not all the same, and that's where the challenge is. That's the beauty of betting on the races. And at the end, the final arbiter isn't who you pick. It's whether your bet wins more in the long run than it loses. And I've always kind of raged against the top pick machine. I get it for a lot of big races. People want the pick. They want, the horse you're excited to bet. And for the Derby and Breeders' Cup and races like this, I get it. Like, that's an easy talking point. That's what people want. I get it. But if you're going to play this game day in and day out, as I do, and try to win at it long term, you have to understand that there's overlays and underlays. You want to bet the overlays. And for me, fair odds is a tool that helps me identify the overlays, not bet the underlays. And the reality is all these CRW teams you hear about, the robotic wagering, things of that nature, this is what they're doing on a grand scale, every race, every day. I really can't compete with that, but at least this gives me a fighting chance to bet the horses that truly offer the best value based on my handicapping.
Sure. No, of course. Of course. This all comes back to any one individual's perception of the race and how they see it playing out. It is interesting. I think this year, during the Kentucky Derby prep trail, we have seen perhaps people really latching on to certain horses. We just saw last week a horse like Forte really getting bet down pretty dramatically. And, horse, several months ago now, Arabian Night also kind of taking a lot of money. There are certain horses that just kind of get a big name, and then you see a lot of money floating in those directions to the point where the horse kind of, to your point, is unplayable to a certain extent. Do I really want to play Forte coming off a 4-month layoff at 4 to 5? That doesn't seem like the most appealing option, even if I think Forte might have the highest probability of your point of winning the race, just maybe not at that price. And so trying to find those value plays where you can and find the best bet, to your point. Now, I am interested a little bit with regards to fair odds. When you've been using these and when you publish them on HR, and we're going to take a look at the ones here for the Tampa Bay Derby in a little bit, do you approach it more from a standpoint of these are the fair odds using these horses for straight win play show bets? Or do you think of it in terms of also vertical bets, that if a horse drops below a certain price, I don't want to include that horse in an exacta anymore, or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question because obviously, there's separate pools.
Yeah,
I do think, and I'll give a plug because I use it. But I'm a big fan of BetMix, which is something that First Racing has. One of the tools on there is called tote boarding, and one of the reasons I like it is they actually give you the percentage that each horse has in the win spot of the exacta pool and the double pools. So if it's race 4, you will see the percentage that horse had bet into it in the race 3-4 double. You'll see the percentage that's getting bet in the race 4-5 double. You'll see the percentage they have on top in the exacta, and then you'll see the win pool. And that's been invaluable to me to really get a sense of how these races are going to be bet at the bell, because late odds changes, big issue.
Sure.
Admittedly, and something like that definitely gives some perspective on where the final odds are going to be. So I mention all that because the win odds typically are fairly correlated to the top spot in other pools. Second and third, somewhat. If a horse is overbet, they're overbet, period.
Sure.
That's actually something I asked inside the pylons about, the irascible ITP on social media, but I knew he'd have good perspective. And
Yeah.
yes, they're different pools. And my question was, hey, look, I think this horse has a 50% chance of winning. He's 2-5. So that's an underlay. That's a terrible bet. If you're taking 2-5 on a 50% shot, you're going to lose a lot. But if he's 2-5 to win, I asked, does that mean he's actually potentially offering value in the second spot because people are overvaluing his chance to win, undervaluing his chance to be second? And the answer was no. If you're overbet like that, you're overbet, period. So either stay away from the race, or if you really don't like the horse, it's a huge opportunity. So to your point, if I see a horse who's really overbet based on my odds, I do see that as an opportunity to maybe bet some others. But I wouldn't say that just because a horse I'm excited about at 8-1 is say 10-1, I'm not going to get overly gimmicky. I'm getting my price to win. That's where I'm going.
I hear you on that. And so let's transition a little bit and talk about this weekend's only Kentucky Derby prep race after last weekend where we had 4. And I felt like we were all just trying to scramble from one channel to the next because it was difficult to keep up with all the races right on top of each other. It was.
I didn't have power.
Yeah. And you were, I don't even know what you were doing. You were listening to I don't even know, old handheld radios or something. But it was this week, though, like I said, the Tampa Bay Derby. And it's interesting. Tampa Bay is a race that, if you remember from the Sam F. Davis, was a very speed favoring track that day. And we saw that play out for both the Suncoast Stakes, where a horse like Dreaming of Snow kind of got out on the lead. And then you could argue 2 better horses, perhaps in terms of just class and form, in terms of Wonder Wheel and Julia Shining, just had a tough time tracking her down. And then you saw it in the Sam F. Davis as well, Litigate getting that early stalking position and then being able to win that race. And one of the things I love that you all do at HRN is you put together a track profile a little bit. And I was stunned when you sent me this graphic earlier, but if you are more than 4 lengths off the lead at Tampa and you are routing on the dirt, you have no chance at winning. And so I just want to pull up this graphic and maybe just talk through a little bit if people are unfamiliar with what this Track Trends is all about.
Yeah, a lot of goose eggs there. And this is since February 1st. So a little more than a month. Last 36 races, which you see in the bottom center there. And it's a goose egg. And the closer designation, when we define it, that's 4+ lengths off. the pace at the first point of call is 0 for 36. That is a very not good number. And anecdotally, just kind of watching the races, I think you mentioned it on Sam F. Davis Day, and it just hasn't been that day. It's been other days.
Yeah.
I'm less inclined to look at the post position numbers only because the average field size has been a little over 2. So you don't really have that much to work from 7 and beyond. So really the point of me sharing this was to point out what a disadvantage the closers are. Now, as we'll get to the fair odds, I'll note that doesn't mean when I see 0 for 36, that doesn't mean, every closer I'm going to make 200 to 1. That just means it's a downgrade. Like, okay, all things being equal, I have horse A who figures to be pressing the pace. Horse B is going to be a closer, and they're equal in all other aspects. For the sake of argument, say that there is nothing separating them except that one variable. I will absolutely make the presser shorter odds on my fair odds than I will the closer based on this information. So, it's all sort of the calculus of how these variables work in and out of each other to come up with a static number, which is my fair odds. And again, ultimately the final arbiter is that price when they go into the gate. A horse you may not think you're going to love. All of a sudden you look up and you're like, man, I only gave this horse a 10% chance, but he's 20 to 1. That's a great bet.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I remember talking to you after the Breeders' Cup Championship, and a horse that I did not particularly like that day was Olympiad, but I looked up at the board and he was 27 to 1. I thought to myself, that seems very silly to me that he is 27 to 1. And that was, sometimes you end up just using that to your advantage when you can.
And that's sort of an example, I guess, a little bit in reverse of what we talked about, where if, a horse you hate or a horse you don't think should be 2 to 5, which Flightline would not be in that category for me. I thought it was kind of invincible, but it's sort of the reverse. Olympiad, you're like, well, you have a 2 to 5. Of course, all these other horses are going to have inflated win prices, but in fact, he had an inflated price underneath as well. One of my bigger scores, period. Just keying him underneath, and totally admit that was, looking at the board, 3 minutes to post, which for Breeders' Cup, thankfully, you're pretty secure in the pools by that point. And seeing that he was, I'm trying to think what that would have been, 5th choice in the exactors or whatever, like you just got to gamble a little bit. Yeah, Life is Good maybe is a better horse overall, but obviously the dynamics were working against him. Taba had some question marks. Epicenter, 3-year-old against older. Rich Strike was over bet. It was a great opportunity. And, having a sense, and you don't have to do fair odds to the point where it's a 100-point line and you're down to the decimal like I do. I enjoy the exercise, so I do it. But even in your head, and that's sort of how the grid started that I put out with the A's and B's. Like, to me, that's not necessarily about, I need to hit 3 A's and 2 B's. For me, the grid has always sort of been about a poor man's fair odds line where, the A's are who I think are going to be the value. The B's I want to keep an eye on. Anyone else I'm not worried about. And fair odds just kind of takes it to the next level.
Well, I think this is that's a great explanation, and this is a helpful track trend to take a look at. And the reason I think it is particularly notable is because this week's favorite, Tapit Trice, is probably going to be 4 lengths or more behind the lead at first call in all likelihood. There's a fair. So? Well, I think this is a interesting point of discussion, and we'll transition a little bit to your fair odds. But, there's a fair amount of speed in this race when you look on the outside in terms of Zydeco and Champion's Dream. I think a horse like Groveland's going to want to be forwardly placed. Shesterkin's getting the blinkers on and should be a little bit more forwardly placed. And so you just wonder, in a 12-horse field, does Tapit Trice, who is not known for blistering gate speed, does he get shuffled back maybe a little bit? And, perhaps through no fault of his own necessarily, ends up 5 or 6 lengths back in a 12-horse field at first call. Not sure. I mean, I could see that happening, I guess. But let's talk a little bit about your fair odds, because you do have Tapit Trice here from your fair odds standpoint at 2 to 1. But talk a little bit through this process and exercise you went through for this one.
Sure. Well, number one, again, it's 100 points. So when you
Mm-hmm.
look at the decimal probability, and 2-to-1 is 1 out of 3, so that's 0.3333 on forever. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
a ton of time to do that, but math people, if it's 0.33.
Repetend
So
three.
that's a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
And on speed figures alone, and he towers on
Yes.
all of them, I believe. I haven't looked at Bayer, but certainly
Yes.
looking at Brisnet now. I was thinking, man, he could be as low as 3-2. Like if he runs back to his last race, he is a winner. No one
Mm-hmm.
else is running a 99 Brisnet in this group. But that's where the other variables come in. The pace situation you mentioned, that was sort of like, okay, I like that he's not too buried inside because that could really be some trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe ends up losing a little bit of ground to stay in the clear, something I don't necessarily mind, but it is in play. I actually think he's, the distance is not going to be an issue as they go longer, but this is only 8.5. So, when he really gets going, might be his next prep, which is, 9 furlongs. So to me, there were just, some factors of the configuration of this race against these and the things you mentioned that I did kind of bump him up from 3-2 just based on, man, if he runs back to this race, how often does he win versus, okay, first against a stake, shipping up here, maybe is a little further back than you'd like if you're a big fan. I'm eager to see what the morning line is. I can't imagine we're going to get 2-1. So even though he's by far the most likely winner among the 12, he's not a win candidate for me, a win bet candidate, excuse me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you just said there, and I think it is. It's interesting to see. I just took a look at the Buyers right before we started recording, and you're right. He towers over the field, and one of the big takeaways I had was I don't know if I forgot or just wanted to forget how slow that Sam F. Davis was. Because there are some horses like a Classic Legacy or Classic Car Wash or even Groveland who, when you look at their Buyer speed figures, you're like, they still got a lot of work to do to catch up to what Tappa Trice could do based upon that last performance. Now, there's some reasons to expect they might. But I'm interested. You have Groveland as kind of your second choice in the fair odds at 5-1, finished second to Litigate last time out. You have Classic Car Wash there, who finished third in that. Sam F. Davis at 8-1, Zydeco at 10-1. I guess one of the things I'm interested in, maybe, and this goes to your handicapping just of the race. I'm interested in the distinction between the 2 and the 3 horse here, where Classic Car Wash is 8-1, Classic Legacy is 30-1. Those two horses finished about a head apart from each other in the Sam F. Davis. I'm just curious kind of why you see value maybe in one area and maybe not the other.
Well, Classic Car Wash was further back than I think he would have liked in the Sam F. Davis, whereas Classic Legacy, other than the win and the slop, which definitely looks like, okay, maybe he likes the slop, maybe the others in the race that day didn't, whatever it was, but his other 3 races that A, weren't wins, B, came on a fast track, he was much further back, and in fact, Brisnet did give him the S designation, which stands for sustained. It's basically he's a closer. Sustained is in, I guess, one run, but I never understood why they didn't use C for closer. That was before my time. But that was a big reason for sort of the downgrade in price. Going back to that graphic where just being that far off is not a winning recipe. I just kind of thought he was really up against it. What I didn't notice the first pass through, or I guess I probably would say I made 3 passes and somehow missed this completely. Irad Ortiz getting the mount is certainly a big jockey upgrade. Nothing against Junior, obviously, is ridden great for Mott, but Irad's the best in the country. So anytime he's getting the mount from someone else, it's almost always an upgrade. So that's worth thinking about. Maybe it signals that Mott has a trick up his sleeve with getting this one closer. So perhaps maybe 30-1, a little overly bearish. I will say, though, with Classic Car Wash, I like the inside draw. And I like the fact that his win was actually gate to wire So maybe with a better break, he could be a little closer. And that was the big determining factor though with those two. And the last thing I'll say about the Sam F. Davis, which I'm interested to see how these horses run back because Litigate's going to the Louisiana Derby, but Brisnet did say it was somewhat of a fast pace. They have a notation for that.
Mm-hmm.
And typically when you have these fast pace, even when they're bias aided, the number comes back really good. Like that's the ideal situation to get a fast number. Speed favoring track on the lead and a fast pace to begin with. They go on with it and the number comes back quick. This number didn't.
Right.
So to me, there's something off here, in the matrix. Is it the race is faster than people think, which is one possibility. The pace wasn't as fast. Maybe the bias wasn't as pronounced as we think. Maybe just the way the horses won was that type of day. The horses behind them aren't as good as we think. There's a lot of answers we're going to get from this race. So the Tampa Bay Derby serves a great purpose there to give us a little bit of a hint on Litigate. If these horses don't run well, Litigate will be a complete toss for me in his next race.
Yeah.
If they do run well, though, maybe a reevaluation of that number is in order.
Yeah, and we talk about betting opportunities. Suddenly, Litigate might be a much better betting opportunity in that Louisiana Derby.
Absolutely.
Because this race the Sam F. Davis could end up being flattered for him. I'm curious, is there a horse with you when you were looking over this? Was there a horse that you really like that you go, man, if I can get those odds, I really like this horse a lot in this particular spot, or a horse that you think you're most likely to get this price on among maybe your top 3 or 4 choices?
I would have to think Zydeco is going to be higher than 10-1. And I will say, and I'll update these as necessary. I've not looked at Ragozin sheets yet, which is usually sort of the final piece of the puzzle for me. I'm not a visual handicapper, so you won't, I'm never going to be waiting to see him on the track or anything like that. Right. Certainly respect those who are able to do it. Our good friend and colleague, Sarah Al-Badwi, excellent at that type of body language. And, obviously some of her colleagues now, Maggie Wolfendale, it's just not my bailiwick. So I always urge people, just because you don't incorporate something, and I got into a spirited conversation with Gino Bucola about it last year, doesn't mean you don't respect that as a piece of research or piece of data, but you have to know how to use it. You have to be comfortable with it. And especially where, I'm coming at it from making probability, using data that is meaningless to me is not going to help. So I say all that not because I'm not interested in how they look, but just that's not something I'm good at sussing out. So to me, the handicapping ends after I see the sheets. That's the last piece of the puzzle, and maybe some tweaks to the numbers. So I am eager to see what Zydeco. We know that Sam F. Davis came back somewhat slow, but he has some numbers on there with the Gates of Wire wins that are a touch faster, perhaps. And if he's in the ballpark, it's sort of, I won't say lone speed threat because there's enough speed in here, but he is breaking from the outside. If he somehow gets to take control of the race, I think he could go Gates of Wire. And right now I'm saying 10-1 is good enough to find out. So I think we'll get that price. And that would be a case, let's say Tappa Trice is even money. Not a great bet, but I will look at the exacta Will pays and try to, kind of figure out in my head, okay, what do I think this exacta could be if Zydeco hangs on? Tappa Trice is the one who catches him. Maybe there's some opportunity there.
Yeah. Now, Zydeco is an interesting horse, and important to remember that he broke from the far outside 12 post in that Sam F. Davis, so has experience in terms of breaking on the far outside. And I just remember how quickly both he and Litigate just crossed and cleared that entire field in the Sam F. Davis and got over on the inside, and how quickly he got to the lead. And, that was his first time routing, and watching that race, I remember thinking, all right, he's going to start fading. He's going to start fading. He's going to start fading. And he just never really started fading. I mean, he got past there at the end, but I think important for people to remember that 3rd, 4th, and 5th between him, Classic Car Wash, and Classic Legacy was decided by a head. basically. I mean, those three basically crossed the wire at the same time. So could have easily been third in that race. So people just looking at position of finish and going, well, fifth place, how's that kind of come back? I mean, that was very close to hitting on the board. I agree. He's a horse I absolutely like. I think is absolutely got a shot there. So I see Mikey Bananas, I think, and now interesting. Champion's Dream, I think, is your biggest long shot. And I was actually surprised that horse came back in this spot because was eased up in the Sam F. Davis. So, I think those long shots, Lord Miles, another one, didn't really show much. I'm not sure there's much to be had there, even if they are going to be 50-1. I'm not interested, I guess.
Yeah, Lord Miles, and I cautioned against leaning too much on the track trends graphic in regards to post, just because the field size, pretty much they're all posts 1 through 6. But Bristnet has a number looking specifically at mile and a 16th races at the meet, which began in November 23rd, and the rail is 0 for 26.
Wow.
So not that I was like in love with Lord Miles to begin with, but that's one of those things I sort of talk about. Like, okay, you have in your head an idea of these horses are, sort of, if you extended the grid, okay, here's my A's, my B's, my C's, my D's. Lord Miles was definitely in the bottom tier. But when I saw that 0 for 26 and he's an S2, so, closer to boot based on the Bristnet designation, I was like, okay, I'm making him 50-1. Which Mark Cassie with the leading rider or one of the leading riders at Tampa at 50-1. I'm a little nervous, but I raised Kane at 60-1 last week. It's going to happen. Like,
oh yeah,
that's the thing with the fair odds. Like you're really kind of making a pick for each horse, and it's not always going to work out. Obviously, if it did always work out, no offense, we wouldn't be talking right now.
Right? No, absolutely. So, but
and then
that's exactly right.
As far as Champion Dream, I'm sorry, he's the Cassie.
Yeah.
That was, it's just such a bad effort last out. And again, 50-1, it feels funny, given those connections, but he was never fast enough anyway. And then coupled with that last effort.
Yeah. Just hard to see that one there, but not every single race necessarily features a riderless horse like you mentioned. Raise Kane last week. All sorts of chaos can happen on the track. In any given Saturday, any given race. But Ed, I really appreciate your time talking to the viewers and talking to the listeners about fair odds and kind of giving your perspective on the best way to approach this race from a betting standpoint. Let everybody know what all HRN's got going on, because you got your power picks, you got your first timers report still, I think, and a lot of different stuff going on.
Well, definitely Tampa's a great week if you're into the pick scene, which I know is not everyone's bag, but that's fine. But I mentioned the meet started November 23rd, so we've covered a lot of ground. Every pick, every race, flat bet profit on the Tampa Bay Power Pick. So this is their week to shine, hopefully. Check them out if you need a little bit of a boost. But the first-timer power ratings are probably the one thing I've been involved in from a handicapping perspective I'm the most proud of. Debut runners, they can be vexing, obviously, but there's just tons of data out there. And thanks to O'Krunk on Twitter, Mark Midland, we think we at least figured out the right path to understanding these debut runners a little better. And if you go to picks.horseracing.com, we're very accountable. We have the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 star. It tells you how often they win, and the 5 stars, as you would expect, win more often. But more importantly, they win more often than their bet, and they have shown a flat bet profit as well. So, for those who like a little bit of help on the debut scene, that product is really good.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. Could not agree more. And I will say that It gives me a great deal of confidence when I like to try to handicap without much help, or like I try to, I'll look at my PPs and then I'll just try not to look at what anybody else is doing. But then once I'm done, I then look at what everybody else is doing
Right.
to see. And I will say it gives me so much more confidence when I see, oh, I like this first timer as well, and this is a 5-star or a 4-star horse, and it just gives me so much more confidence to press my opinion there. And sometimes when there's a 5-star that you all like, it makes me reevaluate things, and I go, oh yeah, I see why they like this horse a lot more now. In some instances, so cannot appreciate that enough, and cannot emphasize how helpful that is. So, Ed, thank you again. Really appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
Thank you all for tuning in to this fair odds discussion about the Tampa Bay Derby. Like I said, make sure to like this video, comment below with who you think is going to win the Tampa Bay Derby, and at what price do you like it? What are your fair odds? Don't just put Ed on the hot seat to do this. We should all try to do this a little bit, and make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, reminding you to have a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you that it's now post time.